Hi guys, it's Miss Curry, and we are going to continue with our writing lessons with models with lesson 3, modifiers. Um, we're just going to review what we did in class today, which is we're going to look at some examples of great writers and how they use modifiers in their sentences. Then we're going to look at some mistakes that students currently make in their writing, especially high school students, and ways in which you can correct those modifier issues. And then finally, we're going to do some practice with using good, precise modifiers in your writing. We'll start with the definition. So, a modifier is a word, phrase, or clause that characterizes another word, phrase, or clause, a means of refining and enhancing meaning. So, when we think about modifiers, we think of adjectives and adverbs and prepositional phrases and subordinating clauses and all kinds of things. And that they're all modifiers and there's all kinds of ways to use them. And the better that you are with manipulating them, the better writer you're going to be. Let's look at our first example. You have to start with the master, so we're going to start with William Shakespeare. I know you guys read Julius Caesar in middle school. So this is from Act 1, Scene 3. And this is when our Julius Caesar, the dictator, is confiding in his friend Mark Antony his concerns about another leading Roman, Cassius. And of course, Caesar's fears are well-founded because Cassius is like in the middle of the conspiracy to murder him. So let's look at the quote. Let me have men about me that are fat, sleek-headed men, such as sleep o' nights. Yon Cassius has a lean and hungry look. He thinks too much. Such men are dangerous. So what makes these lines so memorable are the modifiers Shakespeare puts in Caesar's mouth. Their strength comes from both what they plainly mean and what they imply. The adjectives he uses are men who are fat and sleek-headed. A prime example of such a man as Mark Antony himself. He's a smooth operator and he's very content with the status quo. So he is fat. Cassius is the exact opposite, lean. And with great economy, these two simple adjectives, Shakespeare sketches a character with wolf-like appetites and an appetite for power, making him, from Caesar's point of view, a dangerous, quote-unquote, dangerous man. But adjectives are not the only modifiers that he uses here. He's also using adverbs, and they do significant work. And adverbs a lot of times adverbs can be a danger zone for students, especially high school students who tend to misuse them, and the adverbs end up weakening their sentences instead of making them stronger. But of course here, Shakespeare does not have that problem. His adverbs are accurate and crucial. Caesar has no problem with men who think. In fact, he needs smart men around him, men like Mark Antony. But men who think, quote, too much are a problem, and men who think too much get, quote, dangerous ideas in their head about principles and powers. So very, very precise modifier use by Shakespeare. Let's take a look at another example. Okay, so here we have an example from Annie Dillard's essay, In the Jungle. And Annie Dillard is known for being a very precise writer. And in this essay, she's recounting her experiences in the rainforest of Ecuador. And she obviously found this to be very enchanting. So let's look at it. We were holding cool drinks and idly watching a hand-sized tarantula seize moths that came to the lone bulb on the generator shed beside us. So we see Dillard's commitment to precision in her economic description. One modifier of tarantula, like a hand-sized tarantula. A less meticulous writer would have been content to say huge or very large. Dillard jolts the reader by providing an exact but not overly fussy measurement of the creature. But at the same time, she wants to quietly emphasize that she and her companions were not disconcerted by this, hand-sized tarantula, this giant spider. They don't watch it fearfully, but idly. And this is a reminder that adverbs are crucial. Even the description of the drinks, cool, emphasized the relaxed tone of this isolated place. And she underscores this, again, by talking about the lone light bulb. So, an excellent use of modifiers. Let's look at example 3. This is from Walter Van Tilburg Clark's 1940 novel, Old West, the 1940 novel of the Old West, the Oxbow Incident. And it's basically about mob rule and the consequences that come from that. Now, what Clark is noted for as a writer is not only, that he had this wisdom, but he had a very spare style, like, as spare as the landscape he describes. And he did that very deliberately. So in this first chapter, the two cowboys, the narrator Art Croft and his friend Gil, they ride into this new town, which is like this half-empty village. And the Paiutes that they're talking about is the native people of Nebraska. So let's look at it. After all the thinking we'd done about it, the place looked as dead as a Paiute graveyard. So the entire introductory element of the sentence, after all the thinking we'd done about it, acts as a modifier. Specifically, it's acting as an adverb, implicitly answering the question, when did the place look dead? Besides the phrase's grammatical function, which what's also of interest is that he placed it right here at the beginning. Like a less careful writer could have said, the place looked as dead as a Paiute graveyard after all the thinking we'd done about it. Now, the problem with that, it still is conveying the same information, but what happens is that we don't know what that's referring to. When it's at the beginning of the sentence, it's very clear that it is the place. If it's at the end of the sentence, then we're not sure, is it the place or is it the graveyard? And does it matter exactly what he's talking about? And that little bit of imprecision, that little bit of confusion would weaken the writer. So that's why syntax does indeed matter. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to talk about the pitfalls. Because while carefully chosen and placed modifiers, are going to enrich your writing, there are some pitfalls to avoid. So let's first talk about the adjective strings. This happens a lot in rough drafts. Like, we like to put our strings of interesting adjectives into rough drafts. Like when you're getting in the grips of characterizing something, you tend to sort of splatter it with adjective. So like, let's look at a first draft. It says an evil, malicious, and sinister figure. This is how you could be describing the villain of the piece. But revising, you may see that a precise adjective, one that gets closer to the essence that you're trying to convey about like the evil of this villain, will suffice, like malevolent. So with this modification, a malevolent figure, you have a much better picture of that villain than you did with this whole string of adjectives. Another danger zone is the redundant adverb. Honestly, no part of speech is as overused as the adverb in student papers. Sometimes what I suggest is that students just go through and eliminate all of the adverbs that they put in their paper, because a lot of times you're not considering the meaning of the adverbs when you add them to the sentence. So, like, let's look at our first example here. We have Maguire's contribute to art are very unique. Unique means one of a kind. So nothing is actually very unique. It's either unique or it's not unique. Very unique is meaningless. So you need to, that's one of those things where you go through and you just take out those adverbs. Maguire's contributions to art are unique. But more, the other thing that happens a lot is that adverbs become redundant because they prop up a weak or banal adjective. And the same thing with verbs. So look at the example. The movie is really exciting. Or the team was extremely disappointed after the game. That's kind of dull, right? The movie was really exciting. It's better to pick a more precise word, a better vocabulary that's really going to capture that. Like, the movie was thrilling, the team was dejected after the game. Having, a precise, economic, stronger core word is going to make for stronger sentences. And stronger sentences is stronger writing, and it's just going to do a better idea. It's going to give a better job of conveying your ideas. Okay, our third problem that comes up a lot, and quite frankly comes up a lot in the SATs as well, is the misplaced modifier. Sometimes misplaced modifiers can merely look like careless, but oftentimes they distort the meaning of a sentence, right? So one of the most frequently misplaced modifiers is only. This error creeps into even published writing, like you see it a lot. So let's take a look. The disease only brought misery. The king only wanted peace. In both cases, only modifies the verb, whereas writer intended to delimit the noun. The disease brought only misery. The king wanted only peace. So the error is more serious in the second statement because the misplacement could affect the meaning. The reader may take the assertion to be an implied criticism of the king. He wanted peace, but he did not do anything to bring it about. What a lazy leader. So this idea of, the king only wanted peace, that's all he did. He didn't do anything else. That's all he wanted. Whereas he wanted only peace is a much stronger way of doing it. The other type of error that comes up a lot is like if an entire phrase is misplaced. Like that can be a dangling modifier. So let's look at this example. Encouraged from an early age to pursue a career in business, it is not surprising that he became a wealthy man by the age of 30. We know that he was the one encouraged, right? Like we know that makes sense in our head, but as the sentence is constructed, the participle phrase at the start modifies it. And it has been encouraged from an early age to pursue a career in business. That makes absolutely no sense. Dangling modifiers need to be fixed so that the real subject of the sentence needs to be connected to the modifier. In this case, the real subject of the sentence slipped into a position of the object. So that's why it became a problem. A lot of times, when people look at things like this, your tendency is to groan and be like, oh, who cares? You know what they were trying to say. But the idea of grammar is to keep a very clear line of communication to your reader. You know exactly what it is that you're communicating. You don't need to imply. You know exactly what is going on. And that's important. Okay, so we're going to do kind of a Mad Libs practice, like fill in the blanks. There's no right or wrong answers. Basically, what you're going to do is you're going to read this paragraph and you're going to put in good modifiers. And you're going to have to defend your modifier choice with your classmate. So for each of the blanks, we're going to think about what is the absolutely best modifier that can go there. Like you could say, the park system in our state is nice, or the park system in our state is terrible. The park system in our state is incredible. The park system in our state is overused. So we could come up with a big list of words, but then let's see which one absolutely works the best for the sentence. So you may have to go through this a couple of times and do some editing. So I'm going to pause, or you should pause this, and when you're done, come on back and we'll discuss it. Okay, so what we're going to do now is we're going to do something creative to practice all of these kinds of wonderful strategies that we've learned with modifiers. So I thought what would be fun is to come up with a creative story. So what I want you to do is to select a group of characters from the text that we've read this year. So 3 to 6 characters from any of the books, essays, poems, whatever you want. And then you're going to imagine that this group crash lands on a lonely island together with limited supplies and resources. So imagine the geography. How would they get along? Would they survive? If you want to put it in some place besides an island, that's fine too. Like if you want to have them stranded in an elevator or, they all been abducted by aliens, that's fine too. But, you need to make sure you like have the geography and the characters in terms of how they get along. You tell the story, and what you're going to do is create a rough draft. And when you're done with the rough draft, we are going to come back together and we're going to edit for all of the modifiers that we have used thus far in this lesson. Okay, well, good luck with that. I look forward to reading your stories and hearing about the crazy things our characters are going to do. And again, as always, if you have any questions or problems, shoot me an email or come see me after school. Okay, thanks. Bye.